Hello and welcome back. I'm John Mountjoy with the Kentucky Head Start Association, and this is the second in our series of conversations with Jay McCord about generations and the impacts of generations on Head Start, whether it's the workplace, whether it's dealing with parents and families. And so we wanted to continue this conversation today and dig a little bit deeper into each of our generations. So Jay, welcome back.
It's always a pleasure to be with you. As I say, anytime you call, I'm coming. So I
I
love
love
the
it.
Head Start program, and I love the folks that do a very tough job. So anything I can do to help you.
Well, thanks again. So, one of the things as we look back to the last conversation that we had, that was really sort of our opening.
Yeah.
And we had some real takeaways from that. We learned about attention spans, the eights. We learned about the generations, the fives. We learned about the compression of the two tens. So can you give us just a little quick recap on that?
Sure. So it's all about knowing the times, knowing what to do. And if you know the times, it means you understand the two numbers of 8 and 5. 8 seconds of attention span. People don't have a lot of bandwidth. So you have to really focus on being concise and precise and giving value in short spaces because people don't have a lot of bandwidth. If you remember, we talked about give them one decision to make at a time. That really helps. The 5 is that there's 5 separate generations working side by side: traditionals, boomers, Gen X, millennials, and Gen Z. And when you communicate, 5 different generations may hear something different. And the example I used last time was the words simple technology. And if you throw that out into 5 separate generations, they're going to come back with some different definitions of that. And what's interesting, John, is, no matter what the words are, 5 different generations are going to define them differently, whether that's success or leadership or customer service or hard work. Those two words put together, really cause generational riots. So 8 and 5 are the high level. These are the times: 8 seconds of attention span, 5 generations. And then the compression of the two tens was something we talked about, where at a macro level, at a high level, you have pressure being put on you and your organization because 10,000 baby boomers every day are retiring for the next 18 years. And we're in a 10-year window where millennials have now become the largest generation in the workplace, and they're becoming your decision makers. So that's the generations at a high level, and as fast as I can recap our last conversation.
Yeah. So, we know that this topic is impacting every profession and every workplace around the country and for that matter, around the world. But, I tend to think that it may have a little bit more of a unique impact on Head Start. If we think about who are our directors and managers within Head Start, if we think about who are our teachers and staff within Head Start, if we think about who our parents are and the families that are raising children that are a part of Head Start. And then if we think about the school districts that we're dealing with and other government agencies and how they're wrestling with it. So it just really strikes me that Head Start is this unique place where you sort of have a confluence of all of this. So being able to understand then each one of these 5 generations is going to be really important. So can we just sort of roll through each one of those real quick?
Yeah. And I want to encourage your folks that you can go online and dig and research and a lot of times that's super confusing. What I want to try and do for you is try and make it super simple. Okay. I'm going to give you one word. All you got to do is just write down this one word for that generation, and you're going to be able to connect better. Okay. So instead of a lot of demographics and remember this, remember that, I'm trying to take my own medicine, John, of give them one thing, right? One decision at a time.
That's right.
So one word. Okay. So let's start with traditionals. Traditionals were born before 1946, and they were influenced heavily by obviously the Great Depression and Pearl Harbor and World War II, the Cold War, the GI Bill, things like that. And these folks are, they're on their way off the stage. Okay. It is a shrinking demographic. We recognize that we are losing many, many thousands of these a day. But this generation also is still at the table, interestingly enough. And they don't hold the titles that they used to. They're not president, CEO, superintendent, mayor, governor, whatever, like they were, but they influence through titles like parent, grandparent, board member, advisory member, mentor, right? So they are still very, very viable. I mean, my father is 85 years old as of this recording, and he's still working every day and is teaching classes and doing all kinds of stuff. And he's very viable. He just doesn't have the title he used to have, but his influence is still being felt. So traditionals are that generation. So let me give you the one word for traditionals: rules. Just write down the word rules. They love rules and structure. And why wouldn't they? I mean, think about the public works programs of FDR and the military bureaucracy of World War II and the corporate bureaucracy of post-World War II. So rules is the word you write down. And remember this: these folks have seen more change in their lifetime than all of us.
Yeah.
Okay. So they're not adverse to change, but what they are very adverse to is you changing something without telling them, or without respectfully letting them know why the change. So rules are important, and a lot of people see them as just very locked in. And in some ways they are, unless you tell them why is something changing. Here's the need. Okay. So rules go with traditionals. We'll drop down to boomers. Boomers were that generation born between 46 and 66. They have been the largest generation for the longest time. But they are also, mortality is starting to catch up, but career mortality is catching up, meaning they're retiring at the clip of 10,000 a day. The number one word to remember with them is the word legacy. They know that they have been doing things well for decades, potentially, and that they are stepping off the stage career-wise. So it's important to understand that they are really wanting their work to have mattered. So it's okay to talk about their personal legacy. It's okay to couch something you're trying to move forward as part of their personal legacy. Anytime I am selling someone that's a boomer or trying to get them to move to my way of thinking, I try and tie what we're talking about to their personal legacy. People are going to remember you for this. Okay. And it's okay to do that because they're at that stage where that's super important. So legacy is the key word with boomers. Gen X, mine and your generation, born between 66 and 81. We are the smallest generation out there, yet we make up a large chunk of leadership across all areas. But our generation are generally the parents of most kids in school right now. So if you're dealing with parents, you're probably dealing with Gen X or top-end millennials. So Gen X, the key word for us is the word level. Write down the word level. Why that word is important is, John, you and I grew up playing certain video games. And I always ask, what was your favorite game that you played when you were a kid? What did you love playing?
Gosh, the one that I remember the most is on the Xbox, not Xbox, the Nintendo, Contra.
Contra. I love it. I love it. What, and then, what was the goal of the game that you played? What were you playing the game to try and achieve?
Oh, I mean, you had to beat the bad guy.
Right.
You had to get to the end and beat the bad guy and be the winner.
Right. You wanted to win. And in those games, they all were really constructed around climbing levels. So for those watching, what you have to understand, if you are Gen X or you're dealing with Gen X, is somewhere kind of in our hardwiring, we are trying to climb levels of a game, meaning we're trying to win at something. So that may be, I want to be a good parent. It may mean that I'm trying to go up in my career. It may mean I'm trying to go up in my health. So we're trying to level up. And one way that you can connect easily to us is by simply asking this question. Hey, Jay, what are your top 2 priorities right now, would you say, right? The reason you ask for 2 is because I can't tell you what number 1 is most given days, right? There's a lot of moving parts. But I can tell you that for me, it's my family, spending time with them, and because we have 2 kids right now as juniors in high school. And secondly is this business, is speaking and writing and communicating as much as possible and building this business. So what's important to me is leveling up in those 2 games, if you will. So if you're trying to move me or my wife to some action because of our children, well, you would just tie whatever it is you're trying to get me to do to leveling up in one of those two games. If I'm the elected official, and many of you know I'm a recovering politician, I served 4 terms in city government. But if I'm, let's say, a school board member or the superintendent or an elected official that you need budget from, you need to lobby to get more funding or more resource, then you need to understand I'm trying to level up in a game. The key piece is you need to understand which game it is. Don't assume that it's my political game just because I'm a politician. It might be that I'm trying to spend more time with my family. Whatever it is you're trying to influence me to do, help me spend time with family. So for Gen X, it's level. All right. So traditionals, it's rules. Boomers, it's legacy. Gen X, it's level. With millennials, it's the word impact. Impact. So millennials have grown up, John, in a place where inside their hardwiring, they know they're supposed to change the world. They really do. If you're a millennial watching this, you know somewhere down in your core that you're supposed to do something that really improves the world. And it's interesting because if I'm trying to move you to action, the way that I would do that is simply by showing you how whatever I'm talking about helps change the world. And you don't have to do anything different. You don't have to change jobs. You don't have to do something hard. You just have to sign off on this new budget. You just need to endorse this program or support this kid, right? So the bottom line to it is when you're dealing with millennials, the word impact, having it and having it now is super important to this group. So how is what you're talking about going to help them have impact to potentially change the world? And you might have to spend some calories running through the process of how does this change the world? Because I might not see that, this helping this one school over here. How's that really going to change anything? You have to be the one to communicate that effectively to me. Okay. So again, traditionals are rules, boomers are legacy, Gen X is level, millennials is impact, and Gen Z, the kids that you're dealing with primarily, customization or customize. They are the most customized generation ever, John. My goodness, you can, if you're Gen Z, you can pick up that phone right now and you can have yourself entertained. You can have food dropped in your mouth. If you want, think about that.
That's right.
I want my avatar that I play with to have red socks and a white cap. I can do that, right?
That's right.
If I want Aaron Rodgers to play for the Las Vegas Raiders, I can do that. I can customize my world. So what you have to understand when you're working with these younger folks is that their world is customized and that's their expectation. And that's very hard in a school system or in an educational system in America that is built really on an older model, on an agrarian model, schoolhouse and this set curriculum and things like that. It's hard on teachers. It's really, really hard on teachers. So you got to look to customize as much as you can within that. And that's the challenge. And now with COVID, oh my goodness, it's just all over the map, right? So, and let me speak to that for 2 seconds, John. Can I just encourage you and your audience, the folks watching right now, nobody's got a roadmap. There is no winning formula in business, government, education, nonprofit world. So I don't want you to ever feel like I'm doing it completely wrong. No one is doing it completely right. Nobody's figured this thing out. And so you're not missing out on, gosh, I just didn't read the manual. I'm supposed to be doing this. So people are feeling their way, and it is totally okay right now for you to feel overwhelmed, to feel like there's no clear path, to feel like I don't know if I'm going to keep my sanity today. I want you to be encouraged because we're all feeling that. But these conversations that we're having, John, I really believe, and this is why I'm doing it, they give you a next step and maybe a next step, right? They may not give you the roadmap, but they are going to make you a lot more effective at what you do. So that's the generations. And one more time, you got traditionals with legacy, boomers with, let me say that again. You have traditionals with rules.
With rules.
Right. Thank you. Boomers with legacy, Gen X with level, millennials with impact, and Gen Z with customize. That's the easiest way to keep them straight.
Yeah, as you were going through those, it's really interesting because I was trying to think of them, and you addressed it a little bit in sort of this COVID environment. And the thing that popped in my head was the word flexibility.
Yeah.
And a question for you, are there any generations that are more flexible than others?
Sure.
When it comes to this sort of world? You mentioned traditionals, they're okay with change, but you got to explain to them why that's the case. But then you've also got Gen Z where everything is customized, and so by nature everything may be flexible.
Right. Yeah. So that's a great question. And a lot of times it comes down to the personality. You know those old souls, those people that are like 18 years old, but they're already 45 or 70 or whatever. And those young souls, those 90-year-olds that are just, childlike, not childish, but childlike.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a lot of it has to do with your openness to change and your openness to flexibility. But obviously, as you get older, you're trying to control more. You have a longing for, I'm trying to control this. So there might be a tendency with traditionals, boomers, and even Gen X of, no, it can't be this way, right? But really what's interesting, John, is 2 days ago, I had a conversation, my wife, had a conversation that I was privy to with the head of GE's aviation division. So the number one guy in all of aviation. He's from Kentucky, went to school at Asbury University, and she was doing an interview with him. And one of the questions she asked him was, what's here to stay from all this, right? Kind of like after 9/11, travel changed dramatically, certain things stayed.
Right.
She said, what's here to stay? And he said, absolutely the flexible workspace. The flexible work environment will never go back to going to offices only, that type of thing. It won't happen. So I think everybody watching has to understand flexibility needs to be part of who you are, because this is just where we're going to live from now on. And flexible work is in fluid work, so don't fight it. I think one of the biggest disservices that's been done, and it's showing up in this COVID environment, is administrators and politicians have thrown rules and regulations onto teachers and into school systems, and you are not equipped to make the pivot. You were not given 6 months, a year to figure out how to use Zoom as a classroom and how to engage people distance-based. This is a different skill set. John, you've seen me do my thing live on stages for 10 years probably, and you know how much fun I have on a stage and how engaging that can be, right? And I will be very honest with your audience. For 4 months, from March to June, I didn't make a dime. I didn't make a dime because nobody had live events and nobody was really doing virtual events. So I had to spend 16 weeks doing what many of you all are doing right now, figuring out how do I take what I used to do live and turn it into this virtual. But we figured it out. And now these things, we're doing lots and lots of this, and it's so much fun. So I would just encourage you guys to be flexible, to look for the opportunities, to recognize you can be overwhelmed. You can want to punch, kick the cat. It's okay. Don't do it, but it's okay to feel that way. But the bottom line to it is, John, that these multiple generations, they are your audience, whether they're your kids, the parents, grandparents, the administrators. So I want your audience to see today that, this is all around me, but now I've got a tool because of this conversation. I've got one word for each that helps me connect.
Yep, absolutely. Well, Jay, thanks for taking the time to visit with us today.
Absolutely.
We've had a lot of information thrown at us, not just in this one, but in our previous podcast. So we've got a lot of the background information now. And so now I'm ready in our subsequent conversations to really jump into what can we really use with that information. So fantastic. I hope everyone will stay tuned, and we'll be bringing you more of these conversations in the future. So Jay, thanks again.
Anytime, John.